So Dr. Deborah Rowe is the president of the U.S. Partnership for Education for Sustainable Development, and we are lucky enough here at Earth Force to be able to be working with her on further integrating civic action into environmental programs, which is a big focus for us here. And she's put together these amazing resources that are found on our website at the link that I posted in the chat box. Those are not going anywhere after the webinar, so you will be able to find those well into the future. So if you want to follow along, you can open up that link. And so today we are focusing on resources and tools that you all can use about integrating civic action into environmental programs, specifically in the K-12 classroom. So Dr. Rowe, if you want to take it from there again, now that we have sound, I'm sorry about that, but please go ahead.
No problem. Thank you. I'm really glad to be here with all of you and with Earth Force. Let's get started. What we're going to cover today are the outcomes, really the benefits that you'll receive as well from using these webinar materials. I'm going to talk a bit about what Education for Sustainable Development is and the networks that exist to support you in your efforts. We're going to then focus on one national initiative. It's a high priority and it works well in the classroom, called Beyond Doom and Gloom, Engaging in Solutions. We'll then have some general materials about the impacts of civic engagement and action in the classroom. And we'll review the benefits from using these webinar materials. And then there are a variety of other resources that you can use for civic engagement and student engagement and making the world a better place in your classroom. So we'll be going over a number of those, and then we'll open it up to questions and answers. So starting with expected outcomes, if you use these materials in your teaching, what we have found, and we believe you will find, are more engaged and inspired students who are learning more. You will find that your students are more empowered to help solve societal problems, that they'll feel less, and you will feel less, frustration, worry, and cynicism, that they will develop the skills to build a stronger democracy, a healthier economy, and a healthier environment with less disruptive climate change. Not only do these materials provide skill building for this citizenship or community involvement for a strong democracy, but also it's the same skills that many of our employers ask for in employer surveys that they want in the workforce that they want to hire. So it's good for employment as well. So as we move on education for societal environmental solutions, one of the things we have to recognize is that teaching our students to just change their lifestyles to be more sustainable and more environmentally sound, it's just not enough. Changing just what we do on the school grounds or even with local field projects, it's just not enough. As educators, going to conferences, doing papers, presentations, publishing, that's not enough either, because climate change is really urgent. I've been working on climate change and teaching courses in renewable energies and energy management, and also social sciences, all related to sustainable development, for 38 years. And we have wasted away the time when we could implement solutions at a more leisurely pace. It is urgent that we implement climate change solutions now. And these solutions require policy changes to shift our whole society to green energy with less greenhouse gas emissions. So the students and the public can help, and they need to help, because we have to get this done. No more time for procrastination. Students can practice their change skills and build their identity as a change maker while they do this work. And as we look at the outcomes for education, if students have the skills and the self-concept and the self-efficacy to say, I can make a difference to help our society be better, then we know we've really accomplished one of the big goals for education. So let's step back for a minute and look at what education for sustainable development is. This is a definition that came from one of the international summit all the definitions say pretty much the same thing, but I really like this one. It enables people to develop the knowledge and skills to participate in decisions. I like it because of the emphasis on decision making, on action that will improve the quality of life now without damaging the planet for the future. So ESD, which is the abbreviation for Education for Sustainable Development, is about understanding what actions we have to take that will improve quality of life now without damaging the planet for the future. But even more importantly, it's taking those actions. I've met too many educators who are good at sharing information, they're good at analysis, but they don't do anything to make the world a better place. In fact, they're cynical themselves. And the last thing we need to graduate are more cynics. We want our students to be engaged in solutions, not in despair over problems. And the good news is that the skills that are needed for sustainable development, as I mentioned, are the same skills that employers value. Krista Heiser and I just finished a chapter that refers to that, and the citation is there if you want to look at it at another time. So when we educate for solutions, we have student learning outcomes that have now become part of the national and international literature on education for sustainable development that's consistently include. Students need to know how to think in terms of systems, not just individual change. And they also need to understand what actions they can take that'll create systems change throughout organizations, throughout government, throughout nonprofits and businesses and the different organizations in our society. They also need to learn change skills. So one of the projects I work on is called the Sustainability Literacy Test. It's being used in 60 countries. It's in 7 languages, and it helps educators understand what they need to teach about education for sustainable development. Included in the architecture is that students have a knowledge of what it takes to create systemic change and that they get a chance to practice those skills. And we can start doing that very early on in the K-12 curricula. It means that we're going to include applied problem solving, not just theoretical discussions, not just reading things in textbooks, but actually being out there in the real world with applied problem solving. It includes civic engagement, civic actions. How do we do this? Well, we give the students assignments. We give them activities where they get involved in civic engagement with policymakers so we can shift our societies to a more sustainable future. So it makes it easier for everyone in the country, and if you have international projects, everyone throughout the world, to become more sustainable, which will help improve quality of life around the globe. So let me get into a bit more into the weeds on this. This is a diagram that we created for a National Science Foundation funded library. And you'll notice that in the center are knowledge and skills, but they're applied knowledge and skills. If we take the knowledge and skills that our students learn and help them apply it to real world problem solving, then there's just 2 things we need to do to create a more sustainable future, and they're in red. Of course, we need to change our habits. We need to be less wasteful and less polluting and more aware of the need to create healthy ecosystems and sustainable economies. Yes, but it's got to go beyond private choices to public choices, to policies, so that it becomes easier, more convenient, more viable for people to live a sustainable life because the products they're being offered are less polluting, less wasteful, because the policies in the organizations that they work in support sustainable choices. So these public choices, these policies in the organizational and governmental level are key. And if we do that, we apply our knowledge and skills to create the private and public choices we need for a sustainable future, we will end up with more sustainable communities and sustainable economies. Why are ecosystems on the outside of this? Well, because everything we do is in the context of our ecosystems, as you all know. Oops. We all just received a life sustaining gift from our ecosystems, and we did not fully pay for its cost. We all just breathed. And we assumed that that air is clean enough that it won't kill us. So we have to keep these ecosystems healthy and remember that everything we do in terms of creating a sustainable future is in the context of having healthy ecosystems. So who brings you these initiatives and these resources today? The main initiative I'm going to talk about, Beyond Doom and Gloom, Engage in Solutions, is brought to you by the U.S. Partnership for Education for Sustainable Development. This is an organization that I've been president of for 10 plus years. My day job is being a professor of renewable energy technology and energy management, but this is my other pro bono professional work. We have over 360 nonpartisan organizations that work with us on bringing sustainability to communities, the business sector, faith-based organizations, youth. We have a K-12 and teacher education sector, which is the part we're coming from today to you, international sector, and higher education. Now, I know that Earth Force itself has received funding from General Motors, and I have the wonderful opportunity of living in Detroit. So I know the head of sustainability at General Motors. I actually know Mary Berra as well, and have learned more and more about their commitment to environmental responsibility, green energy, and sustainable development. It's exciting to see the commitment that they've made to use 100% renewable energies for electricity by 2050. It's very exciting that the General Motors Sustainability Director helped to create a climate action plan for the city of Detroit. And in fact, this morning, we just held a workshop. 80 small businesses registered to learn about how to become more sustainable in the city of Detroit. And I've been working with GM and others on that for a couple of years. Mary Berra, the head of GM herself, made a decision that GM will stay in the Paris Agreement because it's the right thing to do. It's also the smart business thing to do, to acknowledge that climate change is happening, that we have to do something about it. GM's not the only one. If you look at this link, wemeanbusinesscoalition.org, there's all sorts of wonderful news of companies that are really being the leaders now from the United States in saying that we need to take action on climate. They're being leaders along with mayors and governors and counties and nonprofits. There's a lot of good news going on. The other group that brings this to you today are two networks that we co-founded and helped run out of the U.S. Partnership. DANS, which is the Disciplinary Associations Network for Sustainability, and HEASC, the Higher Education Association Sustainability Consortium. And I know they're both mouthfuls, but I'll just refer to them as DANS and HEASC. They have over 60 national education associations that have come together to say, we have to educate for a sustainable future. DANS is made up of over 45 academic societies. This is where educators go to learn how to teach specific disciplines. I couldn't write them all out, but you can see the example of the American Psychological Association. We have the National Association of Biology Teachers and other biology associations. I could go on and name all of these, but there's no time today for that. You can go to this website, you can click on participating associations, you can click on the resources page and find a lot of information there on how to educate for a more sustainable future. And these are just some of the associations. I couldn't list them all. The HEASC group is made up of the college and university presidential associations and their academic officers. We also have associations for student affairs, campus activity, housing officers, facilities, business officers, purchasers, environmental health and safety, and others. There's the website for HEASC. We've got great resources there if you want to see them. But we've called out for you onto Earth Force's page with Grace's help, and it's been a real pleasure working with Grace. the top resources we think you can use in your classroom right away. So we will be focusing on those in just a few minutes. But I wanted to give you a sense of who's brought this to you and also who has helped disseminate the information about today's webinar. So in our K-12 sector team, we've been working with National Science Teachers Association, National Council of Social Studies, the independent schools, the superintendents organizations, and many others. So let's get to this national initiative called Beyond Doom and Gloom, Engaging Students in Solutions to what? To climate change. Why is this needed, this initiative? Well, we sat down with our 60 national education associations and said, what do you see as the highest priority? And what they said is, we need an initiative like this. So we heard it from educators. We also heard it from practitioners. And we also heard it from policymakers. Students hear a lot of bad news about climate change now. I mean, the good news is at least it's being taught more in the schools. But when it's being taught, students hear about more droughts, more floods, more severe weather, the sea level rise, the disruption of our civilization and our ecosystems and disruption of our food chain, species extinction, the travel of tropical diseases to temperate climates, and more. This is a lot of bad news. And they're not only hearing about it in school, but they're seeing examples of it in the news, making students feel, and often our educators too, frustrated, worried, confused, disempowered. How can they make a difference with this? And they become early cynics, as I've mentioned. We can't afford to do that. And often the opportunities they see to involve themselves in solutions are too limited. Change your own lifestyle. Don't take bags into the store. Don't drink bottled water. I mean, really? We're not going to solve climate change with just those kinds of behavior changes. Or go protest. You know, go protest a pipeline or go protest a coal plant. There's value to that, but there are so many other ways and important, crucial ways for us all to be involved in the solutions to climate change, that we need to offer those solutions. And what we heard from educators is we can teach climate change, but we're not experts in these solutions. We know the solutions have to do with changing our energy sources, but we're not energy experts. We don't fully understand the barriers. Why aren't we already using more of the solar and the wind and the other green energies? We would welcome materials to use in this course. In fact, in our listening tour, what we got most often is, it's just a good idea to connect students to climate solutions of more renewable energies and energy efficiency. So we developed materials, we piloted them, and the educators and the students told us that they were useful, easy to use, and it taught some skills as well as knowledge that they wanted to take with them for the rest of their life. Now, practitioners asked for this too. They said, look, we own solar companies, we own wind companies, energy efficiency companies, but we're seeing really bad energy policies at both the state and the federal levels. And it is destroying, EERE stands for energy efficiency and renewable energies. It is destroying our businesses and our job growth. So they said our policymakers are hearing from fossil fuel companies a lot, from fossil fuel-based utilities a lot. They've got a lot of money that they put into election campaigns. They also show up with their lobbyists. And we're relatively small, the solar and the wind companies and energy efficiency companies. So there isn't enough support up here at the state legislature in particular for energy efficiency and renewable energies. They said, please, we need more student engagement in energy policy. We're just too busy running our businesses to do this alone. And then we went and did a listening tour with policymakers, and they even said, you know, the people who show up at our office are oftentimes the fossil fuel employees and lobbyists, and they dominate policy hearings and communications. We've also noticed, they said, that when students are describing how we're impacting their future, our fellow policymakers are more open to supporting renewable energies and energy efficiency policies. So the tone of the conversation changes. In one of our pilot states where we did this work, we learned information through what policymakers said to students that was crucial to get us good green energy policies that they weren't telling the environmental groups when they would talk to them. So students play a really important role. And interestingly, this whole initiative started because of a group of students who started, you can look up this webpage, Youth Energy Solution, where they said, contact your utilities, contact your state legislature, because we need to tell them we want better green energy policies. So we went from there and those pilots, and we created this initiative. Now, what are the details? Here we go. It's free. It's easy to use. It helps our students. It really fits into that high priority for what are the solutions we need for climate change. And that is, we need better energy policies to transition to a clean energy future. Oh, by the way, not only will it help handle climate instability, but it'll also reduce respiratory illnesses, which is great. The components include an educator page that can be used by staff as well, a student page, and content that includes a short but very motivating video. It's only 2 minutes long. That says, yes, you can make a difference. PowerPoint slides that you can use in the classroom, short assignments that you can use, key facts on renewable energies, and information on how civic engagement improves learning. So that in case somebody says, what are you doing getting our students involved in policy, you can say, well, it's a high impact learning practice. This is what the educators page looks like. Of course, that's too difficult to read, so we'll get back to its components in a minute. Not only are clean energy policies crucial, but so are these democracy skills. Right now, these policies are being made mostly at the state level. There's some at the federal level. Many policymakers don't understand the connection between climate change and energy policy. So too many are supporting these damaging policies that favor fossil fuels and damage the growth of renewable energies. They literally don't have the facts. And when students show up and express their desire for policies that support a rapid shift to a clean energy future, we've seen a number of times where that's changed policymakers' votes. And then, of course, as I've mentioned, it also builds the student skills for democracy. So don't worry if you haven't gotten involved in policy work before. When I say skills for democracy, as people are elected to represent us, they also need to hear what we want. And that video at the beginning says that. But we give you even more details. Now, the short address for the webpage is climatefixes.org. You're out with people, you want to share this, just say go to climatefixes.org. That then redirects to the much longer URL. The student webpage starts with this video. If you do nothing else today, go watch the video on the student webpage, because it really grabs students and says, yes, look at how you can make a difference. It also has links to civic engagement opportunities on solar and wind, how natural gas is not the solution for climate change, and how we can fix our economy right now, because of course we don't have any way to really regulate these greenhouse gases as a structural part of the economy. So we need to fix that. Why are we taxing income and not taxing this pollution that's causing our climate to become unstable? So a bipartisan price on carbon, we're seeing growing support for that at the national level. There's links to that, and campaigns on how we can go 100% renewables, and who to contact. The students also have information. Oh, and these are PowerPoint slides that you can use in your classroom so that you can talk about it if you want, or you can just send them to the page. The students also receive information on how to contact their legislators, a script that they can use either to talk to their legislators directly or to write something to them. And of course, they can put this in their own words, but it's just, you don't have to be an energy expert. It's just saying we want more green energy. We want more renewable energies, more energy efficiency. We want a rapid ramp up of the implementation of this. And here's the benefits. It'll produce jobs, help the economy, increase health, and protect the environment. And it gives them tips about how to talk to policymakers. Okay, so some of you may be going, I haven't done that before. I'm not sure about the civic engagement, so let me just share with you. This is on our site, Sustainability Improves Student Learning, a U.S. Department of Education funded grant that we worked on with 13 STEM academic societies. And it has links to studies, the citations that show that students learn more when they're civically engaged. Not only do they learn more content, but what they learn are also higher order skills, critical thinking, writing, communication, math, and technology. And it also increases their emotional intelligence and prepares them to contribute to their society. So the educators have not only this short video, which there's a link to that on the educator page as well as the student page, that motivates students to help create solutions and links them to opportunities. But you'll see in the video, we've included some phrases that even welcome climate deniers. Some kids grow up in households where there are climate deniers, denying science, denying facts. And so we welcome them to get involved as well. We also have assignments on how to become a change maker in your community. Oops. And we actually have a reflection assignment where students sign up to learn more, and then they can say, why did you do that? What do you hope to accomplish? How do you see yourself as a change maker? We even have multiple choice questions if you want to include them on your assessments that are multiple choice if you use that kind of assessment. So it's easy to integrate in. Once again, it's urgent to do so. This is a news story from AAAS, of course, an extremely well-respected society, right? And it says 31 top scientific societies are speaking with one voice on global climate change, that human activities are the primary driver. So it's humans who have to make the changes. As I mentioned, we also have key facts on renewable energies. These came out of our He Ask and Dan's call for energy literacy, which we developed along with, we have these fellows programs where people volunteer pro bono to work on national projects. If you're interested, let me know. But we had a fellow from the MIT, Massachusetts Institute of Technology Energy Lab, who helped us with the key facts. You might be interested in a couple of these key facts. One says that right now we have the technology to supply 80% of the electricity needs of the US with renewable energies and energy efficiency. And we can ramp up to 80% of our electricity with green energy and efficiency instead of today's 15%. In fact, we have the technologies that pay for themselves, provide lower costs, and save money for the people who utilize them. So we've got the technology, we've got the cost effectiveness, we just need the policy. The benefit of using these materials, once again, easy to use in any course or topic. We will keep these materials updated. It's more engaging and inspiring for your students. It empowers them to see themselves as people who can help solve societal problems. And they will have less frustration, worry, and cynicism. I feel so badly when all these students are calling me because my name is out there, and so they contact me and they say, what can I do? And you can hear the worry in their voice. So let's get them engaged in solution building to reduce those negative feelings and to build a stronger democracy, a healthier economy, a healthier environment, and less disruptive climate change, which at this point is really key. It'll give them the ongoing skill building for citizenship, critical thinking, and their career pathway. So I know that changing what you do in the classroom takes effort. I know I've been teaching for 38 years. So I know every time I change something, it takes effort. That's why we've made these materials easy to integrate in. But the impacts when you do it are powerful and positive. So it not only reduces students' despair and worry, it also will reduce ours, moves us to solutions. And what we really like, what we're focusing on, in fact, with a project with Arizona State University and a university in Germany and our international community, is that you're providing skills for lifelong efforts to be a change maker. Now, this isn't the only resource we have to share with you. This link is at the top of the chat box. So if you scroll up at the chat box, you will get to the page that has all of these additional resources. But I'm going to get out of my PowerPoint for a second. And I have actually preloaded. This is what the page looks like on the Earth Force website. Now, if you go to the top, you'll see the information on the webinar. So you have to scroll down. And Grace and I worked together and loaded these resources. But now I'm going to take you on a quick tour, and then we'll open it up for questions and answers, okay? So the first one is the website for Beyond Doom and Gloom. See how it doesn't say climate fixes? It turns into this link instead. That's fine. That's what it's supposed to be. You can see it's brought to you by Dan's and He Asked. And here's the faculty resources on civic engagement, on clean energy. It's got the links in there to the assignments, to the assessments. Here's the student page, and the student page starts with that video. I wish I could trust the technology of webinars enough to play this for you. We did it on one webinar, but it oftentimes gets glitchy. But notice how it's got the scripts. We have taken the time to vet for you the links. You click on any of these links, it'll take you to great information about solar, wind, clean energy at both the state and the federal levels, and how you can get ongoing information about how to get involved in this policy work with very simple scripts like the ones that are above. And then we have the piece on natural gas as well, and then they get the clean energy facts as well, and then we have additional links for you. So lots of things that your students can explore there. I want to show you, though, some other resources. This is Campus and Course Conversations. It's brought to you, the originators of this site are somebody who's from a very progressive organization. She helped found MoveOn.org. That was the group that got youth to come out and to help get President Obama into office. And then the other co-founder is a leader in the Tea Party, a much more conservative organization that's really, in some ways, on the other side of the political spectrum. And what they realized is we have to learn how to talk to each other with civil discourse. We have to learn to find the common ground. So we put together for them, using their rules for civil discourse, course energy conversations. And it gives you this same kind of, how do you talk to your policymakers? But before that, there's a structured conversation that your students can have. They can talk to each other. There's even a website on Living Room Conversations where you can match your class up with another class that's from another part of the political spectrum and have these conversations. By the way, on the Living Room Conversations site, you can also find, they just issued a holiday guide. So in case during Thanksgiving and the December holidays, you're going to be meeting with friends and relatives who don't believe in politics the same way you do, it helps you to not have arguments, to heal from arguments, to have fruitful conversations, and to maintain an atmosphere of civil discourse. So you can look for the holiday guide. But let me come back to what we have here for educators. Our next resource is Community Energy Conversations. You can invite your students' parents or other community members, and it's very similar to Course Energy Conversations, but it actually is geared towards community members. And your students can host a community energy conversation about how we can have a cleaner energy future. The next resource on that page is a page from our U.S. Department of Education grant on how to empower students. So on this page is a list. See the first blue link there, these skills to create positive societal change? That's a list of change agent skills that you can look at. And down below that is a little self-assessment list. So your students could say, well, I'm strong in this, I'm weak in this, I need to work on that. And then remember I mentioned those, the citations, the studies on civic engagement. So this section here on civic learning and engagement provides you with that. So you can justify to whoever you need to that this is a high impact learning practice. The next resource we have for you is to say whatever assignment or activity you do in the classroom, make sure it includes these three things, that it promotes understanding without just doom and gloom, that it focuses on solutions, and that it empowers students to make positive changes, moving from analysis to really taking action for systems change. And you can click on any one of these and it'll give you more information, see, because we built these out for you. The next link that we have on your Earth Force page is these are the 13 STEM societies. They came together and created how do you teach sustainability in each of these disciplines. Each one of these is a live link, so you can match the topic you're teaching. And that Dan's webpage that I gave you has even more, and that'll give you more resources for your teaching. Okay, the next one is, I must admit, one of my favorites. This is a woman who's a professor I met up in Montreal. She created 43 videos from 9 countries that show stories of people who have become change makers in their communities. Wonderful stories of a young girl in India who got all these people to plant trees so that in the floods their land wouldn't be washed away. Somebody who's helping her fishing community by getting the weather reports and then announcing it to all the fishermen so they won't die in the more severe storms. Here's a change agent who's in Bangladesh, who, you know, Bangladesh is going underwater. Do you know that? Do you know that already the impacts of climate change are making people lose their homes and lose their food chain? So they've actually created floating farms and floating schools so that their students can still go to school and their families still have a way of growing food. The citizen regulators at Turkey Point, she was upset because the regulators weren't preventing radioactive waste from going into the Everglades. So she got together and organized it and made it happen. She's a great story of a change agent. The second page of this Change Makers link connects you to the story of stuff. It has a quiz on what kind of a change maker are you, and it also has a list of activities for educators. So this is one of my favorites, to have the students explore these videos and look at this change maker toolkit. The next resource, second to the last, and then we'll open it up for questions and answer, is the Center for Green Schools. The Center for Green Schools is just filled with all sorts of information on how you can make your green school, your school cleaner and greener and healthier. It's also got curricular information. It's got things, as you can see, for state legislators as well and how you can impact them. It's got things you may already know about, like Campus Wild, Learning Labs, Green Apple, Day of Service, lots of delicious resources there. And finally, this is the webpage for the U.S. Partnership for Education for Sustainable Development for our K-12 sector team. We wrote standards for you in an iterative process with a lot of our stakeholders for education for sustainable development. We've got learning activities and assessment tools and webinars. There's lots of good information there. There's a listserv that you can join, so you'll get future information on this. It connects you to the international work if you're interested. So that's quickly the list that I have to share with you. And luckily, Grace has put it all together for you on this link, which is also in your chat box. So you have the power. We can choose a more sustainable future. And why don't we just go ahead and open it up to questions and answers? Have there been any questions, Grace, in the chat box that we want to highlight? And all of you, would you like to put your questions in the chat box?
Yeah, let's give everybody a second if they have any to type them in real quick. The only one so far that we've gotten was just asking if they'll receive the PowerPoint slides, and I just want to confirm that after the webinar, probably sometime tomorrow, you guys will receive a link to the PowerPoint slides as well to the webinar recording. So you'll get both of those. They will also be posted on our website. So the same link that you have will have the webinar recording up there as well. I do want to mention that on our website as well, that same earthforceresources.org, we have a ton of other resources up there as well. So what EarthForce does is also integrate civic action into environmental education. And so if you guys want to peruse, most of the resources are under the resources by step tab. We have a 6-step curriculum that basically takes a project-based learning approach to civic action in environmental education. But there's a ton of children's activities as well as educator resources under that tab that can help you out as well. So we do have a question. It says, I'm interested in applying citizen action pertaining to our water quality studies. Is there something on your website that is applicable to my studies? Dr. Rowe, I know we have stuff on our EarthForce website specifically to water, but you want to answer that first. Go for it.
So I didn't add additional ones that would be for U.S. local water quality studies. I mentioned that there are a few of the videos on the Changemaker, the Shoreline Project link that has to do with citizens getting involved in their local water quality. I'm not sure if you're talking about the water quality studies that are connected to EarthForce or just ones that you're doing on your own. I want to strongly encourage you to connect with your watershed council. Many communities around, you're doing it on your own. Okay. So many communities around the country have watershed councils. Here we have the Huron River Watershed Council. And they are always trying to ascertain what's going on with the quality of water. And if you are doing studies, you could be one of the groups to feed data points to them. And so I would contact them. They are oftentimes connected in statewide or regional or national initiatives where they then feed it into a much larger database. So I think those are a couple of ways that you could get involved. Okay.
Yeah, there's another international database too that might be helpful to you. I don't think they're actually linked to our website, but we have worked with them in the past. They're called Earth Echo, ECHO, and they have a really user-friendly water monitoring data set that is all citizen science submission based. And it's gone back for like 20 or 30 years or something like that. And so you can access historical data likely in your area that might be helpful to whatever you're trying to access or do. And it could strengthen your action project or whatever you're trying to accomplish. I echo Dr. Rowe in saying that watershed councils are very helpful. We partner with a lot of watershed councils all over the country, and they are really helpful in knowing who to contact locally and where to start, basically. So I think that's a great place to start. We do have a lot of resources on our website that talk about doing water monitoring and water quality stuff with kids. That is something you're interested in. So that would be under the resources by step on our Earth Force resources website, and then go under step 1, which is an inventory. Hope that answers your question. If not, feel free to email me and we can chat more.
And there's one other piece that I want to say about that. And that one other piece is that as you look at where you're going to focus, which issues you're going to teach, you really got to look at this climate change, because our water systems are going to be tremendously impacted by the increasing impacts of climate change. Climate change really is the most urgent in terms of the breadth and depth of impacts. So we've got to get off of fossil fuels. If we don't do that, we're going to see such climate instability that whatever you were trying to maintain in your watershed is going to be very difficult to maintain. So we picked this project on engaging in green energy policy because we knew it would impact not only the climate instability issue directly and green energy policy directly, but also overall ecosystem health.
So it looks like they have done like a watershed symposium, which is really cool. We do a lot of those too. We call them summits, that bring students from all over the watershed to a conference that shares techniques, data, brainstorms, project ideas, and they're looking to organize one electronically so they can share real-time stuff. I'm guessing maybe so you can do it more frequently. So do you have any suggestions on how to organize something like that electronically or online?
Sure. So I think are you teaching this within science is the topic? Or are you teaching it with it? Okay.
Yes.
So within science, then I would say let's go to the National Science Teachers Association. Let's see if they can organize a webinar that looks at best practices around this kind of work and get it out to all of the science teachers. I would also suggest that you look at what are the social impacts, the human impacts of not having healthy water, and how do we cope with that? How do we mitigate that? And then you can bring in the National Council of Social Studies. You could even bring in AASA, that's the superintendent's organization. What I find is that if you ask them to host a webinar with you and you will organize it, that you'll have greater reach. My criteria for what I'm going to recognize, I'm a college faculty member, right? So I have my day job. I've got to do that work. But everything else that I pick up has to do with how am I going to have the most impact. And we have a tendency to think just doing the local, but the work you're doing could be replicated by science teachers all across the country. You may also want to reach out to Sencer, SENCER, that's the citizen science group, and they can help you with that. I think there's a higher ed component to them, though. I think the National Science Teachers Association would be a great place to start. And if you get stuck, if you don't get anywhere with that, if you reach out to me, I can do some connect with the NSTA people we work with and the NCSS folks.
Great. All right. We have another question. So, my primary goal in water quality labs is to correct student misconceptions about dirty water. Any suggestions about how to convey to students how much progress has been made in air, water quality, etc. over the last 40 years? So it sounds like they're trying to remove the doom and gloom aspect, like kind of like what you're talking about.
Yeah, well, so as long as that's in the context of, and we still have crucial solutions, crucial issues we have to work on today, that's great. I don't want to leave students with the idea of, oh, things are better now. And I'm sure you didn't mean that we would just leave them in a complacent mode. And so I would need to think about that a little bit to give you the best answer. So all I can give you is kind of an off, because I have to look back in the psychology literature, right? And what kinds of presentation is going to have the most impact. What we've learned in teaching and learning and educational psychology is that episodic memory is very strong. And that if you can evoke an emotion while you are telling a story, and if you can have them practice the story and put it in their own voice, that it will be more remembered. It has to do with elaboration theory, memory theories, learning theories, and also emotional intelligence. So, what I would suggest is make it a story. Let them, places where things used to be dirtier than they are now. So, let them do some research and come and tell the story of the good news. And as they become the bearers of good news, you're also bringing to them the coping skills of looking for the stories of good news and balancing those stories with the stories of here's urgent things we have to work on now. Yeah, I think that's great that you're doing that as long as it's in the context of, and here's the things we need to work on today. I could also suggest there's this thing called a solar cook it. If you go to solarcooking.org, and you'll see all sorts of projects you can build out of cardboard and aluminum foil. You can take water from and just about any body of water, unless it's been chemically contaminated, and you can produce water that is safe to drink. We did it in Oaxaca, Mexico, at the Instituto de Tecnológico a few decades ago. You might also look up life straw, because I do think it's important for students to think about what happens if their water system goes down. And is their water safe? I think it's really important for students to know that bottled water isn't tested for safety like water out of the tap. And so take them to Life Straw and let them see the stories of kids who don't have access to clean water and how they can be part of those solutions at the same time that they're creating a backup system for themselves at their home that'll provide clean water if their own water systems do get contaminated.
Great. All right, we have another question. What strategies and advice do you have for promoting student interest and motivation? Kids are into sustainability and civic engagement, but during the school day, they get more focused on traditional academics.
So I have this question that I add to any assignment that I teach. And the question is, how can you use what we've just learned to make the world a better place? Sometimes we as teachers have to think about what are we teaching and how is it relevant so that we can bring some examples of that. But, even if it's, I remember when, okay, this is more high school, but I remember when I learned that calculus, integrals, and derivatives are used to help thermostats to keep buildings at the right temperature. And that without those equations, our furnaces and air conditioners would overshoot and get too hot or too cold, be wasteful, and produce more pollution. So if you can bring those stories in, as even in math class, right, to how can we use what we are learning to make the world a better place? And maybe they can get used to looking it up. And here's what we're studying. How can we learn from that to make the world a better place, whether it be in history or social studies or definitely science? So I would start there. And the other piece is build bridges, right? So what do they care about? And whatever their interest is, help them find where their giggles are. Now that may sound pretty funny, but there's a lot of anxiety in our young people today. They feel like they're not good enough, or they feel overwhelmed. Of course, a lot of us are struggling with information overload, right? So if we remember to make learning fun, and I could do a whole other webinar on that, right? Then they will continue to be lifelong learners. There's so many different ways to do that. I can't even do that in just a few minutes. But for those of you who help your students, imagine yourself as a water scientist. Imagine yourself as somebody who's making a difference in your community because you can. And give them early wins. There's another piece to this. Let's say they contact a policymaker or contact a watershed council, and they can't accomplish what they wanted to accomplish. Then it becomes, that's fine. Part of being a change maker is it doesn't always work, and you can learn from it. So take away the fear and anxiety of things not working and set up the long term, hey, I'm somebody who can make a difference in the world. I also find telling stories of other people who have made a difference really matters. I often tell the story of my three students who called the state senator and said, we really want you to support this solar bill because we think it makes a lot of sense to have more solar in the state. It looks like this would help. And at the third call, the senator picked up the phone and said, you're the third call I've gotten today. I didn't even think the solar stuff worked in Michigan. I'm going to look into it. And he changed his vote. So sometimes it's by telling the stories. And then there is something called the Giraffe Project, where students go out into the community and they find the heroes in the local community who are making a difference and have them come back in and tell those stories. All of these feed into the positive motivation around learning.
All right, so far that's all the questions that we've gotten from other participants, but again, feel free to keep typing them in. I had one that I would like to ask Dr. Rowe. And early on, you mentioned that systems thinking was something that can really help integrate this into the classroom. And so I was just wondering if you could elaborate a little bit more on systems thinking versus, I think you said like end approach or something like that. So
Yeah.
what did you mean by systems?
Sure, systems thinking instead of just individual change.
Yep.
Before I get to that question, there's one more I want to add to this piece on motivation.
Sure.
When I first started teaching in this way, we created something called a positive futures fair. It's written up, it's in the old ERIC database. I did a chapter in a book about it. If you Google me on Google Scholar, it should come up. But if not, I'll just explain it to you because it's easy. We would have our students imagine a future society that was more positive than the one today. And they would have to talk about what that society looked like. And we'd break them up into small groups. And then they would present to the class their vision for a positive future. We did it for 7 years in a row and documented all these scenarios for the future that the students made. And what was interesting is that almost all of them were the same. So there's this kind of underlying consciousness around what's possible for the human species. And we had students who normally would have left the class. Now remember, I'm at the college level, right? So they weren't doing well on tests. These are the students we normally wouldn't get good retention with, but they kept coming. And when we said, what's bringing you to class? And they said, it's this project of creating a positive future. We took it one step further and we had them reach out to organizations in the community that were actually working on the positive future. So it included things like nonprofit healthcare organizations, it included green energy companies, it included how do we create livable wage for people, a bunch of different types of organizations. They came in and we had a positive futures fair that the students then wrote a little press release, we got it in the newspaper, and we opened it up to the whole community. And as the groups came in, and some of them were businesses, some were nonprofits, they would talk about their career pathways. They'd talk about both career opportunities and volunteer opportunities. I have never seen students as turned on to learning as I did when they saw, wow, I could do this for a career. Wow, I didn't know this was possible. So I would strongly recommend let your students organize a positive futures fair and come up with positive scenarios for the future. Okay, now let me speak to the systems thinking. There are a number of components to systems thinking. The first one to talk about it and teach it that was really taken up by the education community was Danella Meadows. Danella, unfortunately, is no longer with us, but it's Meadows, just like a meadow. And you can read her systems thinking books and articles. In the business world, Peter Senge, Senge, is very well known for his work on systems thinking. So I'm going to give you some of the key components, and these are the components that also make somebody a great change maker, a great change agent. First of all, define whatever the societal problem is and understand its components. Um, Secondly, look at the human-made, tell how old I am, I just said man-made, that's terrible, human-made systems that have contributed to this problem. So for instance, not doing a tax on carbon pollution is a systems error that has contributed to more and more carbon pollution, which is one of the causes of this climate instability. Once you understand how human-made systems have contributed to the problem, then you look at how human-made systems can help solve the problem. That's where you might get to, example, a bipartisan price on carbon. Or you might get to a rule that says, no, we're not going to offer plastic bags at the grocery store anymore, because that way you'll learn to bring in cloth bags and to reuse them. Those are systems kinds of changes that we as human beings decide together that we're going to make those choices to take care of our commons, our ecosystem, so we won't have a tragedy of the commons. Then you also, let's say that you've got potential solutions out there, but you got to make them happen. So then part of systems thinking is understanding, how do you build a coalition? Who do you invite? And let's be inclusive in who we invite. That's where civil discourse and finding common ground comes into play. But you understand that there are key influencers you want to invite into your coalition. And after learning how to build a coalition, that's part of systems thinking. Then it's about finding the leverage points for change and acting on those. And then building the resilience to continue to create that systems change. So if you look back on that Empowering Students page that has a list of change agent skills, that gives you some of it. And then Peter Senge's work and Danella Meadows' work will give you more. If you haven't looked at the 4 steps of the natural step process, that can be helpful too. And just in general, the pieces I just outlined, and the sustainability literacy test also outlines those. That's helpful. I would name one other thing. The United Nations has come up with what's called the Sustainable Development Goals. These are 17 areas that we need to work on to improve quality of life for present and future generations. And if we think in terms of those systems, water systems, food systems, gender equality systems, poverty systems, that helps to improve systems thinking too around these key issues. Was that clear? Was that helpful? Did I miss part of it you wanted me to cover?
No, I think that was great. And then we also had a comment that the Waters Foundation and Creative Learning Exchange are also great online resources with curriculum, case studies, research, and a whole bunch of other stuff that overlap with sustainability for systems thinking. So if there are other people interested in this approach, those might be other great online resources to check out too. All right, another question. How would you approach talking about climate change with students if you know that some of their parents are climate change deniers? And I know you touched on this, but you didn't go too in depth. So this would be great to dig into a little bit.
Well, I would definitely start by teaching the rules for civil discourse on the Living Room Conversations page, because you don't want to get your students so hyped up that they go home and argue with their parents, and the parents show up at the school board and you're going to have to deal with that, right? So I would start with civil discourse. So the students will be able to have constructive conversations, if they choose to, with their parents. The second piece is, I would teach that piece of science that says we can never prove anything. All we can do is find a lot of evidence. That's the philosophy of science, right? Any graduate school is going to give you that course that says, remember, you might still be able to falsify these theories and hypotheses at some point. So you can't ever say anything's absolutely proven. And that's why we don't say we've proven that climate change exists. We've just shown that the preponderance of the evidence shows that climate change is happening, and here's how. The other thing is to teach it in such a way that students can use their own level of understanding. So when I teach climate change, I talk about a car with dark upholstery. I talk about how the sun's rays come through the glass and hit the dark upholstery, and the sunlight gets absorbed and turns from shorter wave light radiation into longer wavelength heat radiation. And that glass doesn't allow heat radiation to go through as easily, so it reflects some of it back into the car because heat radiation has a longer wavelength than light radiation. And that's why, even when it's cold outside, when you get in a car on a sunny day, you'll find that the upholstery is warmer because you have just heated up the car. That's what's going on with the planet. And our greenhouse gases are acting like the windows in the car. The other piece is you're not responsible for your students' parents. You're responsible for educating your students. But sometimes it's really helpful if you all know how to address the myths. So there is a wonderful website called Skeptical Science. You can Google it in. I think skepticalscience.com is the website. And what it does is it looks at all the different myths around climate change. And then it gives you citations as well as simple facts so that students can address this climate denial piece. But they don't have to do it alone, right? You might even say to them, do you have people in your world who don't understand the science of climate change? You don't have to go out and convince everybody right away, but as you try, if you bump up against things, come on in and we can talk about it. Part of that talking about it is letting them know that sometimes their parents are the last ones to understand because they're just their kid, right? So they still think of them as younger than, and maybe not knowing enough, even though sometimes the kids are learning the most up-to-date information. You can actually say that. And so, you know the dynamics of your school, you know the dynamics of your school board, and you still have to teach the science. We have no choice. Now, if you are in an extremely backwards place where they are very hot on climate denial and you are fearful for your job, then I would walk through the energy door. And if you go to uspartnership.org, uspartnership.org, and click on energy fixes on the left, you'll see all the same materials that we just showed you with Beyond Doom and Gloom, but it's actually in the language of political conservatives and libertarians in freedom to produce your own energy. Many of those arguments will resonate a lot better than starting with the climate change. Last thing, there's an organization called Eco America. They've done a bunch of market research and a bunch of publications on how to communicate effectively about climate change. So I think you'll find that to be very helpful as well. But I think you're in a great position to have those community energy conversations and bring in those parents. Welcome the conversation. We have to build the bridges. And one story to demonstrate how powerful it can be. In Georgia, Georgia had one of the most conservative areas in terms of energy, and the utility company was not at all interested in green power. And the Sierra Club got together with the Tea Party and created something called the Green Tea Party. Gotta love that, right? Sierra Club and Tea Party got together, created the Green Tea Party. And the Green Tea Party said, we want the right to not be controlled by a government-regulated monopoly of our utility company. We want the right to put our own solar panels, to produce our own power. And so we want you to change the state laws to make that happen. And now in Georgia, they won. And many parts of Georgia are now developing this program. You can put solar energy on your house. You pay over a very long term through your utility bills, just like we do now with fossil fuel plants. And it makes it affordable for anyone. That's the way for us to be going in this country. So I would say embrace it. And don't leave it just to the students. Set up those community energy conversations so you can help build those bridges. And if you want to put in the chat box something, that's just a whole list of things I gave you really quickly, but these challenges are real. So if I didn't answer all of that for you, let me know. Or you have information. My email is climatefixes@gmail.com. I'm glad to talk to you about the nuances of that.
Yes, and you guys all have my email address. I've been emailing you all directly from my account. So after this webinar, if you think of any additional questions that you would like to ask either of us, please feel free to reach out. We have no problem continuing this conversation. So I don't...
I have a question for them.
Sure.
Which is, would all of you please put into the chat box which of these materials you think you're going to look at first to use in your classroom? I'm just very interested in, how effective were we at getting this information across? And what do you think at this point? Because that helps us with how we're going to present these materials in the future.
Yeah, that'd be great.
We had talked about doing a poll, but I don't think we did that, right, Grace?
No, but we do have one. Let me see if I can pull it up.
While she's doing that, if you would be willing to put into the chat box which of these materials interested you the most and what you think you might try first, that would be great. And if you're not thinking about trying these things, why not? We want to understand that too. Oh, and there's the poll. So we'll give you just a little bit more to put your answer into the poll. Great.
Yeah, let's give the poll another 30 seconds. It looks like we've got half of you voted so far. This is just helpful for us, so we appreciate it.
And I noticed that somebody put in they're going to do the skills to become change makers. That's great. I also go to that Shoreline Project Change Makers PDF as well. I'm just such a fan of those videos showing how people are already change makers in their community.
All right, I'm guessing everybody who's going to vote voted. So it looks like everyone said they will use the resources. So good. I'm happy. Yeah.
All right. Well, I don't see other questions. So are we set? What do you think?
Yeah, unless there's any last minute, maybe another 2 seconds for any last minute questions. But like I said, please feel free to reach out to either of us. You have my email, and Dr. Rowe is at climatefixes@gmail. Is that the one you want to use? All right. She's got about 100 emails, so.
climatefixes@gmail.com.
And like I said, in the next day or two, you guys will receive another email from me with links to these slides as well as the video of this webinar. So thank you again so much for attending. I really appreciate your feedback and all the great discussion we've had. So with that, everybody have a great evening, and hopefully we can continue this discussion. So thanks again to Dr. Rowe.
Thank you, Grace. It's been a pleasure working with you.
All right. Bye-bye, everybody.